I'm not buying this idea that we're supposed to walk around and be scared of one another. It's not how I live my life. It's about going out there with your heart open still, to trust people, to actually see the good in the person in front of you. You know, when I turn up in these places, after years of doing this now, I still feel helpless. I still feel like, what the bloody hell am I doing here?
When I consider where I was this time last week, here I am with my thick jacket on, my North Face jacket. We'll get you, Neil, you're a fashion accessory. I've got my winter warmer Walker trousers. I've got my boots on. This time last week, I was still in a t-shirt. Right, navigate my way past this, or through this path here. Here we go. Right, and there, just ahead of me, is a sign. There's irony, a sign that says flood. Hang on, let me get a picture. It's just been cast to one side near the road where I've parked the car. So what have we got? Let's right, the X100V 1/25, 3.6. It's not. Hang on, I've still got the neutral density filter on. Here we go. God, this thing's quick to shoot. Here we go. Right, 3.6. Let's do that again. 1/25. ISO 3200. That can't be right. It's not that dark. Oh, anyway, there's a sign. A sketchbooker to start the week. When I made some notes about how I want to start this week's show, they all seem to make coherent, ordered sense. So I'm hoping as I deliver them, as my opening monologue, if you like, they still will, because I read over my notes on the kitchen table just while I was packing my camera bag, and I had a moment of, which I'm sure we all have from time to time, even my other listener who's practically perfect. So deep breath, here goes. This time last week, if you're listening to this on the day of release, I was about to return from our first African retreat in the Gambia, which I think, due to the glorious chaotic nature in terms of how much ground we covered photographically and physically, probably shouldn't be referred to as a retreat, more an adventure stroke assignment. So next week then you get to hear that episode that was recorded in the Gambia, and I invite you to join us as we navigate rivers that were like oceans, markets that were, well, an all-round assault in a positive way on every one of our senses, festivals and dancing that, it was frankly hypnotically emotional, for me at any rate, and experiences that had me appreciate that rather hackneyed but very accurate cliche at times, which says, people who have nothing have everything. I returned, I have to say, a bit conflicted, if I'm honest, in terms of the narrative of my own life and my grumbles, and certainly I returned a bit more grounded, which I hope is a feeling I can nurture and persuade to hang around for a while. I found and saw for myself that the trinkets of wealth don't make you wealthy in the New Age traditional sense of 4 low-profile tyres affixed to a handsome-looking pearlescent-coloured sports car. No, the real wealth comes from community, and a word we use so often on this show, in context of photography at any rate, connection. And none of this, all that, was news really. It's just that sometimes you do need an experience like the last couple of weeks to pull the rug from under your feet, to stop you in your tracks from the day-to-day that you're all tangled up with, and say, whoa, enough already. Look around you, allow yourself some breathing space. And today's story is about a man who in 2015 had his enough already epiphany moment and decided to connect with those for whom wealth doesn't exist in label form, you know, the latest iPhone model or Louis Vuitton monogram bag. Other designer labels are available. A man who found that one thing you can't place a price on is connection. Who learned, and I quote now, "You cannot buy back one moment in time. It's the most precious gift you have to give anyone. If you give a person your time, you can't buy it back. You could spend $1 trillion a day, but you can't buy a moment in time. Spoiler alert, you'll hear those words twice today in a New York way. Joshua Coombes is my guest. He does take photographs, yes, or make photographs, but this conversation is led by the fact that Josh cuts hair. Yes, hair. But he doesn't do it in a fancy branded salon, no. He doesn't do it for wealthy clients in the traditional sense of the word wealth, or the more understood interpretation of the word wealth at any rate. He does it for people who arguably have nothing, so that he can gift them, for a moment in time at least, everything. He started a movement which is a wonderful pay-it-forward story, one that's captured the imagination of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people through newspapers and radio and television and internet. And this is where photography comes in, with the help of our regular mentor, Valérie Jardin, where social media and pictures they've positively conspired to deliver a message that isn't really about haircuts. Well, it is slightly, but it's actually about hope. I've spent my last few weeks photographing stories about humanity at times, and today, well, this is a human story. It's, a photographic one in places, one to think about as we make our photo walk on this show, where we walk and make pictures, photographically sketchbooking our time together each week, enjoying the letters and the inspirational stories you've sent in, and listening back to special studio conversations with guests from around the world. A show for those who find escapism and peace away from the noise of this world, putting miles under our feet and making a picture or two to remind us of where those footprints were left. Today is a story, really, about people and about connections.
Today on the Photowalk.
A haircut's a vehicle, actually, now. It's a great way to physically, help somebody feel a bit better about themselves.
There is never a time where I'll walk by and not make eye contact and say hi. Whereas it's so easy to do, and that's what people do. And that's what hurts them the most, is feeling so invisible.
We all have this fundamental need to be seen, to be heard, to feel, as Valérie said, like we're not invisible. We're not just part of the furniture.
I mean, can you imagine being homeless in any big city, and then this pandemic?
Most of these things in life, when we get out of our comfort zone, it's asking us to grow, to evolve.
To this day, I think it was the most important project I ever did.
Photography it's everything. You're telling stories, and it can be enough to really move somebody. It's about being able to put yourself forward without having that fear that I think we all do, really, which is that fear of rejection.
That's Joshua Coombes and Valérie Jardin sharing thoughts about the movement Do Something for Nothing. And before I give you a flavour of what's in today's mailbag as well, thank you to our extra milers and mpb.com who sponsor this show and keep us here week on week. mpb.com is a website where you can safely buy, sell and trade quality used photo and video gear online in the UK, the States and Europe, and you'll be a part of the circular economy. Right now, as camera bodies are in high demand, MPB have increased the amount you can get paid for your camera. Now, here's how it works. You go online to mpb.com, click the button at the top of the website that says Start Selling and Trading, and just follow the very easy instructions where you're prompted to enter the model name and click a box for the appropriate condition. From there, your kit is collected from your front door, and then MPB pays you for your camera gear within days. I've just done it myself the last couple of days. And here's a bonus. If your gear is in better condition than expected, they'll automatically increase the amount you get paid. Avoid seller fees when you sell to MPB with a price commitment that gives visual storytellers, that's us, the right price up front for our kit. So if you have some kit at the moment where you think, I haven't used that for years, this is the time to send it to MPB and get paid. I'll have a link on the show page today, or simply remember these 3 letters, mpb.com. Hang on, Neil, that's more than 3 letters. You know what I mean. On the show today then, how pictures can really make us appreciate the I'm hesitating because I'm going to say it. Really appreciate the awesomeness of Mother Nature. Neil, did you just use the A word? I did. But not to describe a blueberry muffin on an Instagram story. No, for good reason. Find out later. We take a wintry walk in amazing, and I might even use the word awesome again, windswept Norway. Don't hide under the covers, but I might mention AI. And actually, you might like the answer, or at least the thing I mentioned, along with those 2 scary letters. And we find out what actually is at the end of the pylon. A bit like being at the end of the rainbow, but with 400 kilovolts of... I can't use the A word again here, can I? No. It could have the same effect as saying Beetlejuice 3 times. And we all know what happens if that's done. Right, shall we walk? Checklist out. Coffee, check. Garibaldi's. Oh, it's good to be back with my Garibaldi's. I forgot to take them to the Gambia. Check. Walking boots. Check. And if you have any experience, some hairdressing scissors, because it turns out they're a magical way to connect with people. Check that one too, and you'll find out why soon. Let's walk. The more I walk with this show, the more episodes. I can't believe we're at 419. 419? The more of these that I make, the more I just want to talk to people about connection, because that seems to be one of the word that ties all this photographic stuff together. The connections we make with each other, the connections we make with the world as we photograph it, whatever we photograph, whether that's landscapes, animals, birds, the connections we make. That's the most important part. I think I'm beginning to believe that's the piece of the jigsaw that holds everything else together. But that's what today's program is all about, and we're doing it through hair. Something that I know you're looking at me now, something that you're saying, well, Neil, that's not really a subject you know a lot about, is it? No, don't be cruel. Don't be like that. Right, a letter. Let's start with a letter. Back to your thoughts this week from the mailbag. Where better to start than in beautiful Norway land with our old friend, steady on with the old Neil, our friend Kevin Rugland. Dear Neil, I like that. I was trying to explain starting a letter with the word dear to our teenage boys quite recently, Kevin. They didn't get the concept, really. They didn't get the point of it. Why don't you just start with Neil, or write hi, or just go straight into it, they said. To which I replied, lawyers only really do that, don't they? I'm sorry, by the way, if you're a lawyer. You're not you're not the lawyer I'm about to describe, because, well, you've got a softer side because you carry a camera. That's like a passport to a softer side. But have you noticed lawyers, they miss out the salutation. They go straight for the jugular, don't they? Makes me wonder if they charge, not just by the hour for the advice they give you, but by salutations as well. 150 quid. Where did that extra bill come from? Well, Neil, we had to write Dear Neil 3 times and then yours sincerely 3 times at the end. It's 25 quid a pop. We can't be wasting our time on salutations. Anyway, moving on. I'm digressing already. Dear Neil, Kevin says, it's been a long time since my last email. Yes, I know. Where have you been? You don't write, you don't send Christmas cards. But since then, I've been in a bit of a rut and exploring another passion that's actually opened a door for me. The next 3 years will be a little tense and stressful, the good kind, I hope, because I'm learning a new profession, pursuing a part-time study related to the new job, and my wife and I are expecting our second child this summer. You don't do things by halves, do you? As you can imagine, it'll be a bit hectic for a while, so I hope to squeeze in some photo walks where I have the time. But you can't leave us, Kevin, wondering what this passion and this new job is. I mean, you've left a whole important part of the conversation out. Getting back to the present, says Kev, I've been tempted to try the fabled Fujifilm GFX camera for my landscape / contemplative / abstract photography, call it what you will. So I've finally pulled the trigger and got myself a second-hand GFX 50S and the GF 35 to 70mm for a start. Blimey, that's fantastic. Very nice indeed. Yesterday I packed my bag with the GFX and the XH1, which my wife uses, and we headed to Lister. Even though the weather report predicted rain and wind, we drove along the fjord where we live and over some mountains to reach Lister, where the sea meets the shores of Norway. We hope to capture some crazy waves hitting the shores along with some dramatic clouds for stormy photos. And when we arrived, the wind was so intense that we had to shout to hear each other. That's a bit how I feel in pubs these days, Kev. Can I call you Kev, by the way? It's Kevin, isn't it? Sorry, I've gone into Kev like my friend, my reprobate buddy, Mullins, Kev. We managed to capture a few decent... You've called them scratchbook. Is that your version of sketchbook images? No reason why it shouldn't be. And I had the chance to test my GFX. I love it. The ergonomics are excellent, and it doesn't feel too heavy. Also, during the editing process, I appreciated just how much information is stored in the RAW files, giving me the freedom to crop a little closer. I tell you what, with a GFX, without getting technical, so technical that I get a nosebleed, you can crop a long, long way in, can't you? Anyway, feel free to skip this next part unless you find it interesting. I don't know. Shall we skip it? I'll read it. Let's see where we go. If you ever find yourself near here, reach out if you want to explore this part of our land. Lister is rich with history. From the Iron Age to the Atlantic Wall of World War II, we have a preserved Viking path that winds through a small part of dense woodland, leading up to cliffs overlooking the island of Hydra and, is it Andabaloya? I think it is. There's also a fertility stone erected in the Iron Age. Steady on. Look the other way, kids. I learned last week, by the way, that the fruits of the baobab tree produce a powder that, mixed with salt, I think it's salt, can be mixed to make a drink that makes for a very intriguing camera club talk about that sort of thing, if you see what I mean, Kevin. While we're on the same sort of subject, we have bunkers of various sorts, says Kevin, even some cannons left behind, and I've heard rumours of a World War II aircraft wreck near an airfield that the German troops built. There's dense woodland, as well as long beaches, and additionally, Lister is known for its birds, making it a beloved spot for bird watchers and photographers. Where do I sign, Kev? That wasn't in the least bit disinteresting, uninteresting. Anyway, please somebody, hurry up and design the teleporter, because that's the kind of place that I want to go. It sounds fabulous, Kevin. Sign me up. Anyway, I'm sending some pictures from my walk or drive, if you like, with my wife. Kind regards, Kevin Rugland of Norwayland. I've popped them on the show page, Kevin, and a good selection of them. I'll put a link to your work too, so we can enjoy more of your photographs. I particularly love the picture. I've made it so you can click on and expand the pictures within the show page. But there's a picture of the shoreline with what looks like sea between us, i.e. where I'm standing with you as you're taking the picture, and a small island, almost a sort of sandbank by the looks of it, because on that sandbank there appears to be a small hut, a very, very lonely small hut, which looks like the absolute perfect photo retreat. Just you, the sound of the sea, and your thoughts. Go and look at it on the show page, see what you think. Thank you for your pictures and your letter, and congratulations upon the mini Rugland that is on the way. There we go. You'll have a whole new photo project atop the other bits that you haven't quite told us all about, which I'm looking forward to hearing more about. If you'd like to send in a letter like Kev, please do so. I'll give you the email address. It's stories@photowalk.show. Stories@photowalk.show. Send me some thoughts, where you are, what you're photographing, what you're up to, and some pictures that we can put on the show page. Let me get a sketchbook image of the path I'm treading today. It's one of my favourite paths, Brimpton. Barney's not with me today, so Barkalot's not been with us on the show for the best part of a month now. He's off with his girlfriends, or girlfriend today. Again, Wendy. He does love Wendy. Honestly, when I tell him in the morning that Wendy's coming to pick him up, he goes on Wendy watch. He's at the window, barking at everything that he thinks might be Wendy. Right, including cars. There's Wendy. No, it's a car. There's Wendy. No, it's a bike. There's Wendy. No, she's going to be another half an hour yet, Barnes. Right, let's take a picture back along the path. I tell you what, totally different story to last week. The light, everything. That can't be as high as that ISO. Goodness. It really is dark. Right. 1/2/5, 3.6, ISO 400. And there we go. There's a sketchbook image. Very, very different pictures to the moments I recorded last week in the Gambia. Obviously, totally different weather. I do like the idea of what is pretty much always 12 hours of sun, 12 hours of dark. I mean, it's not right on the equator, but close enough. It's almost like it's like somebody comes along and switches the light on in the morning and then switches it off in the evening again. Anyway, a couple of bits before I introduce my guests for this week's studio conversation, and I'm going to have to, because the rain's just started falling. I'm going to find a little shelter to hide under as I play that to you and we listen together. I was talking recently about AI on the show. Oh, Neil. Oh, why'd you have to go and mention AI? I was enjoying this and you've gone and spoiled it. You've mentioned AI. No, stay with me. I think you'll like this. I got a notette from Andrew Hardacre in Hong Kong who sent me the following. Hi, Neil. Being a Leica lad. I did smile at that. Who remembers the Likely lads? I mean, you have to be of a certain age and in the UK to remember that particular programme. My mum and dad loved it. Story about two working class lads who live with each other and what they get up to. It's a comedy of its time. I tell you what, note to self, I'll put a film on the show page. I'm sure there must be one on YouTube. If you don't find one, that's because there isn't one. But I'm sure there must be. And see what you think. Go at it with nostalgic eyes is probably what I'll suggest. But we could have something called the Leica lads, couldn't we? Totally different. They wouldn't be working class lads, obviously. But I say that. It's not necessarily the case. But the Leica lads, totally different kind of adventure. Anyway, hi Neil. Being a Leica lad, says Andrew, there was an interesting article in LFI, which is... I don't think it's not the official. Is it the official Leica magazine? I don't know. Anyway, it is a Leica magazine. It was in January. The M11P has a new chip that allows verification for whether an image is original or manipulated. It includes in the metadata an extremely scaled down version of the image as recorded. Leica's talking about retrofitting this via a firmware update for other cameras, which I agree, Andrew. Having read more of that piece now, safeguards the authenticity that we need in images for people to believe them, particularly, as you've rightly pointed out, actually, as you say, the fight back against AI images has started, vital for documentary photographers in conflict zones, for example, which is spot on. So thank you for that. I for one, would be, I mean, not that my images are devoured in terms of news, but I'd be quite happy to have that retrofitted to my cameras. So thank you for that. And then next week, some news. We have the African Retreat episode, which I think is going to be a production job and a half. I mean, you record stuff thinking you've made it self-contained. That's what I intended to do. I thought as I press the record button each time I record a piece, I'll explain it so that I can just join them all nicely together. But best laid plans and all that sort of stuff. I've come back realising I've got about, 30 linking bits of material to write, but I'm looking forward to bringing it to you. It's an adventure that has it has lots of funny moments, but it does have it does have thoughtful moments that have us, well, certainly have me thinking on a very different plane. And that really is a good link to today's studio interview, because that's really what it's all about, thinking on a different plane. Now, I knew about Joshua Coombes, partly because I know Valérie Jardin's work with him, but also because I'd seen him and what he does featured on various channels, including YouTube and Insta, and some articles. And I'm pretty sure, although I couldn't find it, the BBC isn't always the easiest website to search for stuff that they've done in the past, but I'm pretty sure that I saw a story about him on the BBC as well. Anyway, suffice to say, his work, cutting hair, is about humanity as much about hair. Or hope, as I said earlier, as much about hair. And it's about communication. And I really do think there's some common ground between what he does, cutting hair in the homeless community, and what street photographers do, or certainly street portrait photographers do, and what we'd been doing last week in our group in the Gambia. And that is taking time to talk with people, to communicate, to be with, to share time with them. So there is a photographic angle today. And it being the second Friday of the month, usually photographic mentor Valérie Jardin would be here to talk about projects and inspire you to make your own. But when she mentioned this particular project to me before I went to the Gambia, as the one that she'd talk about this month, when she mentioned this, I think we both thought in tandem, why don't we have Josh on the show to share his experiences of this incredible Pay It Forward project or movement called Do Something for Nothing. Sam knew instantly who I was talking about when I mentioned him. This is the man who decided to go and cut the hair of the homeless on the street in the name of dignity and for the cause, I think, of communication. So here is my chat, 2 parts. First part of my chat this week with both Josh Coombes and Valérie Jardin. Here's part 1 of 2 parts. 2 guests today, a 3-way conversation that's as philanthropic as it is photographic, really. Josh Coombes, the architect behind the Do Something for Nothing movement, and Valérie Jardin, who you know very well, who's had the pleasure, and I dare say you might moot privilege, Valérie, to have photographed Josh at work. And to give this whole thing some context, Josh, do something for nothing. Let's start with 3 very important W's. There's a what is it, a when did it start, and why was it something you felt you needed to do? Let's go for the what is it first.
Do Something for Nothing is a movement, a social movement. It's something that started on social media. Obviously, social media can be all kinds of things and can be a negative place, can be a positive place. I at the time, about 8 years ago, living in London, when I started to go out and do the work that I'm doing, which is going out and giving haircuts on the street for people who are experiencing homelessness, it wasn't really something I even thought about sharing, first of all. It was something that actually came from a need within me of seeing this problem that I think we all see in the cities and towns that we live in, whether that's in Europe or in the US or, North America. Homelessness was always something I felt empathetic towards. But when I started to go out and cut hair for people, and the way I do that is go out with my backpack and sit and literally set upright on the curb or, a shop doorway somewhere where somebody was, I'd hear these stories within the first few months. All these stigmas around homelessness really dissolved for me. So that was the start of feeling this need to want to share this and communicate this to the outside world. And that's when I started using social media to do that on Instagram.
And it's fair to say that this has now become your life. Are you still professionally cutting hair?
I haven't actually been paid for a haircut for a long time now. So this is something after about 6 months to a year, I started to do this more often. And really it just became my life, going out and meeting people in this way. And, the reason for that is wrapped up in homelessness, wrapped up in each person that I was meeting. Yeah. I left my job in the salon after about a year. I kept doing this. I didn't really know exactly how that was going to work out at the time. I started working part-time jobs in bars and cafes and different things. And to be honest, that wasn't that much of a new scenario for me. I used to play music before I was a hairdresser, and that was sort of how I kept things going for many years of my life. So it wasn't that scary in that respect. Paying rent in London obviously wasn't easy.
No.
I was in a shared house at the time, but I was just following my heart, and things started to work out.
It's about, I mean, this seems to me to be a story about hope as much as it is a haircut, isn't it? Because that's what the communication aspect to this is about. You give people hope.
Yeah, and it's something I give talks about the work that I do, and I know there's so many different ways you can look at going out to help somebody. And I have been asked the question before. People say, okay, great, I understand a haircut's a nice way to make somebody feel better, but how is that really going to make a dent in this issue? How is that really going to sort of create change in the long term? And of course, that's something I advocate for as well, in the systems that we have to try and do that at the moment. But what you said about hope is really a huge part of it for me, because if somebody doesn't have hope in their life, if, it's all dark, there's no light in their life right now, what you can do is you can show up and you can provide something that is really important today. Yeah, it might not be the magic one to fix, somebody's life. Not only would that be amazing to do with resources to be able to say, hey, look, I've got you a new apartment, but that's really only half of the story, because without addressing some of the deeper issues that were perhaps there before somebody ended up in this situation, perhaps family issues, perhaps issues from their upbringing. But even if there was a magic wand to do that, I think it's really important to focus on what we can do today. And that's why I know that's a big part of this for me. A haircut's a vehicle, actually, now. It's a great way to physically help somebody feel a bit better about themselves. But the truth is, it's just a conversation. It's just showing up and listening and seeing where that goes. And yeah, you might be able to provide that little bit of light for somebody to at least feel hopeful again about today, at least have something to anchor themselves to say, okay, well, it's not all bad. Because perhaps I don't know, people listening to this, I'm sure Valerie, Neil, yourself, we all know what it's like when you have those moments in our own life where you really think, God, is this bad day's turned into a bad week? It's different for everybody, but I certainly have had times in my own life where I've really thought, wow, I'm really not feeling good right now, and trying to break that cycle. We can all do that for each other in our own way, I think. I
want to bring Valerie in here because in 2015, I know you have a relationship with social media that's, I was going to say a tad challenged at times. Maybe I'll come back to that and explain what I mean by that. But social media, photography, it's part of this whole vehicle, isn't it, of getting the word out there of what you're, not just what you're doing, because this project's not I've heard you say this project's not about you, it's about the people that you serve. But in 2015, Valerie comes on the scene. Just explain for maybe Valerie, you want to explain the email that you received from Josh.
Yes. So in 2015, I received this, and I still have the email, Josh. I received this email from someone I did not know, telling me, "Hey, this is what I'm doing. I think he had Googled street photography Paris, and my name popped up. And so he reached out. I said, I'm going to be going to Paris, and I would really like this work documented from a photographer perspective, from a documentary photographer. Well, I didn't know I didn't live in Paris, and so I couldn't be there at the same time he was there that first year. But I put him in contact with another photographer in Paris who actually followed him for an afternoon or a day, and it worked out really, really well. But Josh and I stayed in contact. I started following what he was doing, and I started thinking, okay, we gotta do something together. And it was not till 2017 that we finally met. On the streets of New York, actually. I got Fujifilm involved to sponsor part of the expense to bring Josh over to the US, because Josh works, pretty much on, getting sponsorship here and there and giving talks and everything. So I wanted this experience to be, not to cost him anything. So Fujifilm helped fund that first project.
I didn't realize that.
And then we met. And seriously, within 5 minutes, I was shooting and he was cutting hair. And I will always remember it was Janusz, and there were a couple of guys sitting on the bench. And Janusz is one of the one of Josh's clients, I would call them, who touched my heart the most, especially in New York. And I think of him a lot, actually, often. I go back to those pictures and wonder what happened to him. And so you listen to the stories, and this was completely new for me. And as a street photographer, I always insisted on not photographing homeless people just because they're there. And, a lot of street photographers will just photograph homeless people on a park bench. And to me, that's the wrong approach. If you're going to photograph someone in this type of situation, and vulnerable situation in general, tell the story, but don't start just photographing, just go shake their hands, ask how they're doing, and then document it in a way that's going to raise awareness. And so this was really, really new. And I learned a lot. It was probably, to this day, I think it was the most important project I ever did. And it really changed me. It changed the way I see homeless people to this day. There is never a time where I'll walk by and not make eye contact and say hi. Whereas it's so easy to do, and that's what people do. And that's what hurts them the most, is feeling so invisible. And so I learned so much doing this project on the streets of New York. And then a year later, just a few months later, actually, January in Paris, I was there to visit my family. And instead of teaching a workshop in January that year, I said, no, I'm just going to spend the time with Josh. And we spent a few days on the street of Paris. And that also was an eye-opener and a life-changing experience.
How do you go about photographing this? I know you said that within minutes, yourself and Josh were you were launched into it. He was cutting hair, you were photographing, and it was like you'd known each other for years. But I guess it's important all along that these people who haven't had their hair cut, some of them for quite a while actually, feel comfortable with the concept. Well, first of all, the concept of a stranger approaching them saying, I'm going to cut your hair out of the blue, because it is an unusual, I'm going to call it an unusual gift in many respects, but also not making it feel like a photo shoot, because there's a lot for somebody to unpack who is homeless, who's dealing with, A, the haircut, B, the photography, thinking, where has all this come from? I mean, this is probably a question for both of you. Maybe Josh first of all. How do they unpack this moment?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And, I think that exploring this too as well, it's so important, because I think any situation, any person with photography, it's anything that's sensitive. I think capturing that moment has to follow a connection. And I think that that's really how I lead with all of this stuff, because I'm not a photographer, and even though I've used the camera a lot now, and, I enjoy that so much, being behind the lens. But I say that in the sense of when I first began, I was just using my iPhone, and it is a really sensitive thing. And I just had to follow the feeling and the moment, and it always followed the connection, as I mentioned before. I'd always speak to somebody, I'd get to know them. Then after we developed some kind of bond, even if it was even in minutes, I'd say, is it okay if I take this before and then I do an after photo of somebody? And it's amazing how, as Valérie spoke about, how we just clicked straight away. And I think it was just creating an environment really that's comfortable. And I don't think you try too hard to do that, apart from just to be, and just to not try too hard, just to let the moment be what it is if somebody really wants to talk. And that was the case with some of the people we met on that first day in Tompkins Square Park in East Village in New York. There was a couple of people who were really charismatic anyway, who wanted to chat and wanted to almost like show off their new haircut to people walking by, and maybe even quite enjoyed being the star of the show for a minute, because I think that that's actually a beautiful part of it. For some people, we all have this fundamental need to be seen, to be heard. As Valérie said, like, we're not invisible. We're not just part of the furniture of the city that day, especially with homelessness, and that's something that I think we experienced with people. And then, there was other people we met who, you could tell they were going through it a little bit, but they were still happy to be photographed. But it's about just being more subtle in those moments, and, not being in people's face. And obviously, Valérie, the beautiful thing about this is, like, after the haircut, she'd show me all these images, and I was like, I had no idea you were even there, or that you were, because there'd be these shots of people's hands and the the storytelling aspect of this, when we first started to work together, it was just like, wow, it's so beautiful to see how she captured all these different moments. But I didn't even have a clue that she was there. I was just getting on with the haircut. So I think that that's probably something to do with it as well. She was almost like a ninja, like being there but not being there, you know. So there's a subtlety to this process from a photography aspect I'm sure she can speak to.
Yeah, and actually, you know, I don't bring the camera into my eye, so I was visible the whole time. I engaged them in conversation as well. I wasn't just a photographer. I was part of the conversation and asking questions and laughing with them, crying at times, and always be available to talk. And then, of course, my camera is small. I'm shooting at 23 millimeter. It's silent, and I do my street photography thing. So yes, I tend to be kind of invisible. So I was having a conversation. They knew they were being photographed. Obviously, that's the first thing I asked. Said, "Okay, do you mind if I start taking pictures now?" And no one said no. They even signed releases, especially because, you know, they're in a vulnerable situation. I think it's even more important to make sure they know that we're doing this project to raise awareness and so forth. And because Fujifilm wanted to show those pictures, they had to have a special release. It was just so easy in a way how we met, and by the time I landed, dropped off my bag, met Josh at that park, which that was the plan. And while he was waiting for me, he had already met a couple of those guys that were sitting there, and he was engaging in conversation. So we met, hugged, and said, "Hey, there's a guy waiting for us right there." So, I mean, literally, it was 2 minutes later. He had his scissors. And so I didn't have time to think. I didn't have time to ask him, how should I approach this? You know, it just, it's like pieces of a puzzle that connected. Yeah.
We often, I know, Valérie, we've talked so much about this, and I'm inexorably looking for the silver bullet approach to street photography and how you approach somebody and say, "Hi, I'm Valérie, I'm Neil. Is there any chance I can meet you?" And so on and so forth. And this is the first time I think I've met somebody who works in a similar plane in many respects. Josh, with regard to going up to people, maybe it's my silver bullet question here and trying to understand how you engage with somebody, because there's a lot of similarity to street photography in this story. I mean, you can't just march up to somebody and say, "Here we go, mate, do you fancy your hair being cut?" I know it's a communication thing and it's a conversation thing, but I'm intrigued as to how that conversation starts.
Yeah, you know, I can't explain it other than saying it's an energetic thing. You know, it's everybody. I think I've got better at recognizing when I'm on the way to speak to somebody, whether they really want to talk to me or not. And of course, still being able to say, "Hello, how are you? How are you doing?" But certainly after that initial conversation, even a few sentences, I think I can tell whether somebody is in a place, even if it might not be this openness, as I said, we're used to in, you know, the colleagues that you work with, the people you see each day, you know, these social interactions. Of course, they're very different when it comes to certain neighborhoods and parts of town where you might have a lot of people living on the street. There's a different approach there. There's, you know, kind of approaching it in obviously a very different way. But yeah, it's an energetic thing, really. I think sometimes it's just reading that moment. And, you know, there's so many different methods. You know, I personally would always lead with, as I mentioned before, that connection with somebody and feeling like they are comfortable in that moment. Obviously, there's many different ways of going out and shooting. You know, someone like, is it Bruce Gilden, who goes and like his, yeah, no, that's a very different thing. But it was always fascinating to me when I saw his method to snapping people randomly on the streets of New York. And, you know, it's this.
Josh, if you were the Bruce Gilden of cutting hair, you'd just launch in and start cutting it before they even said anything to you.
Exactly. So for me, I can't do that. You know, I can't even begin to imagine what that's like. But there's nothing, you know, everyone's method is beautiful in its own way. But for me, it's always, it's that conversation, having that chat. Then you kind of read that moment. And oftentimes that's something that, you know, there's plenty of times I don't shoot photos of people. There's plenty of times I read that moment, and it doesn't mean I'm not going to go and cut somebody's hair and still spend time with them, but they might not want to be on camera, and that's great. And that's you know, part of this process.
But I'm still trying to get to this A to B bit. You see, you can see my problem here, Josh. I've been looking for the silver bullet thing for so long, of how you suddenly say, "Can I cut your hair?"
Okay, the silver bullet for me is
maybe there isn't one. I'm
laying out your worst case scenario and really thinking how bad's it going to be if you throw if you put that, for me that's a big part of it. If I think, well, I say hi, how are you to this person? Hey, actually I'm a hairdresser and here's what I do. I cut hair on the street. Do you fancy a haircut? It's about being able to put yourself forward without having that fear that I think we all do, really, which is that fear of rejection. What if I lend a handout to this person, or I'm at least putting myself out there as a creative person wanting to engage in you in some way? What's really the worst thing that's going to happen? Somebody might say no. They might tell you to get lost or say it in worse language. What do you do with that moment? You take that and you feel bad and it weighs heavy on you, or you go, okay, well, that's cool. And I'm going to move along and see what else is out there. So I think that's a big part of it. Just I've learned how to get over that fear of perhaps being rejected, perhaps wondering what's going to happen, the outcome, not being attached to the outcome.
I think this is a question for you both, actually, and you'll both have slightly different takes on it. I heard you, and I'm not sure the phrase, Josh, is wrestling with the concept of the hashtag do something for nothing as a sort of more superficial side of the process. Because, when the relationship with social media is a weird old thing. We need it, we love it, we hate it, we loathe it, we love it again. But photography is an important part of the storytelling process. Perhaps, Valerie, you could start with this, actually, because it has been an important part of what Josh does. But at the same time, you don't want it to feel cynical, do you? This is great story for likes, because this is not what it's about, is it?
No, I don't know. I think people respond to it in a very genuine way. And I've never, and a lot of people do what Josh does now. It's become kind of a global thing, and that's great. And, but I don't think anyone would do this for the likes. Obviously there are a lot easier ways to get likes on social media. The response was great. We had a beautiful exhibit in Minneapolis that lasted for over a month, and people were in tears. We had a beautiful space. And actually, since we're talking about the exhibit in Minneapolis, our dear friend Jeff Harrington, who facilitated the exhibit, that was his gallery, passed away a few weeks ago.
I'm sorry.
We loved you, Jeff, and it was just really a shock to both of us to hear the news. And Jeff was really touched by the project, said, yes, let's do an exhibit. And so again, we managed to get some sponsorship to have Josh come over for the exhibit. And we got sponsorship from WHCC, a wonderful lab here in the Twin Cities, who did all the layout. So we had a feature photograph and then a storyboard with other pictures and then the stories of each homeless person featured. So we had one side of the exhibit wall was Paris, the other side New York. And before taking it down a few weeks later, Jeff told me, he said, you have no idea how many tears I saw of people going through this exhibit and seeing those pictures. And the response was just amazing. So it really opened a lot of eyes.
I'm glad you mentioned the tears, because having watched a few videos of when you are cutting hair, Josh, tears is often the response that you receive from the people whose hair you're cutting.
Yeah. Neil, this is I think to speak just slightly to what you said about social media first. The thing is, intention's everything. And for me, social media is Instagram's, it's an amplifier for me. I look at it like when I used to play guitar. If you have a message, I used to play in a band, if you have a message, it's a way of plugging it into something so more people can hear it, but really not wrapping up your self-worth, who you are as a person, and investing too much of yourself into it in that way. It's really just a way of being able to communicate. And I don't really engage too much in whatever other people's version of that is. It's I think it's just about intention. There might be some people going out there to go out and help somebody, and that's going to be so crass if it's somebody, taking a selfie of themselves giving to a person. People are going to feel that on the other side, and they're going to feel that that's all wrong. So I think with this, it's just a way of, for me, trying to put reminders in this space of our common humanity. And yes, sometimes I'm Josh and I'm part of that because I use my voice to talk about these things. But I think the tears that Valérie spoke about, to connect it back to what she was saying, you know, it's an amazing way to give people, whilst we're kind of doom scrolling sometimes, these moments of humanity. And that can happen from so many different places, so many different accounts, people doing so many different things. An amazing part of this journey, the last sort of nearly, actually, you're right, 9-10 years now, is I am so much more hopeful myself because I connect with grassroots organizations, individuals in lots of different cities who are deciding to get up and do something themselves with their creativity, with the things they're good at, with the things they're passionate about, or by just advocating for certain issues. And, you know, it's so easy in the world today, especially, you know, I think perhaps we say that every year, especially right now, but God, it's so easy to feel overwhelmed. It's so easy to almost feel fatigued by the weight of the suffering, the challenges we face as human beings in, you know, this world, humanitarian issues in the environment. And I think it's, for me, this work, and especially when I give talks and I go a bit deeper with this, and what I want to leave people is that feeling of transitioning some of that into what you can do instead of focusing on the things that we can't. Like how as an individual you can actually become, relight those embers inside you if you're feeling disillusioned with everything, to start building that fire again, to be that light, to be whatever that is you want to be in your world, to live your message. I think that there's so many different elements to do something for nothing in this work. But for me, I think fundamentally now through this journey, that's like a big focus of mine. I go into schools, I speak about this, you know, young people who are really engaged in all these issues, who are more aware than ever and do want to help and do want to make a difference. But sometimes, where to start, where to begin, bringing it back to like these principles of trying to embody things like empathy and compassion, not being these buzzwords that kind of you don't really know what to do with. It's like, how do you walk out into the world today? Perhaps lower your benchmark, perhaps going out and just having a conversation, showing up for somebody. That's a good way to start.
Josh Coombes and Valérie Jardin return shortly. There'll be some pictures on the show page, of course, to go with this conversation today. And I'll link to Valérie's site as well, because Valérie talks about her first connection with Josh, or Joshua. And also she has pictures that she made in New York City and Paris when she was with Josh. Right, we're back to our regular programmes, having had some specials over the last few weeks, but next week we've got a special, of course, the Gambia special from our retreat / assignment / adventure. I'm itching to tell you about an idea we've had for the adventure next year. Now, I know we've got our wonderful Inverness Scottish retreat coming up, which I'll tell you about in just a moment's time. But there may be something that when it was mentioned, and I can't remember whether it was my idea or Jason Florio's idea, or maybe we both said it at the same time, I don't know. But when this particular thing was mentioned, which it's not even so much lightly teasing you about at the moment, we both said, that's something that we watched on telly in our youth. And I think in both cases with our dads. And it was, we have to do that. Anyway, that is teasing, I realise, just as much as I was chastising Kevin Rugland for earlier on. If you'd like to send in your letters, now we're back to some letters shows, then I'd love to hear from you. This Photowalk show is all about you. It really is. Yes, we have our studio guests, and it's a joy to talk with them, but it's driven by you in many respects, by the letters that you send in about photography and walking, what it means to you. We do have, I'm always taken by the generosity of your letters and what you do share and what you're prepared to share, particularly when it comes to mental health. So please keep sending them in. Send me pictures of where you're walking, what projects you're walking with, or or working on. And if you're sending pictures in, make them 2,500 pixels wide. Please, if you can resize them. If you can't, I haven't said this for a few weeks, I'll do the heavy lifting for you. And you might want to send them in by Dropbox or WeTransfer if they're large. And send us a few words as well. There's, on the contact page, I've put a few, I suppose, conversation starters in there. If you've been thinking, I'd like to write into the show, then please go to the contact page. You'll find a few conversation starters in there, which might just help you. And it has information on how to contact us on the show with your stories and pictures. I do love this, by the way. The rain does bring out these just incredible greens of lichen and moss. And I know I make many pictures of these as my sketchbook pictures or photographs, but I'll make no excuse because I just love the colours. Here we go. Let's get this. So I'm using my X100V, my Fujifilm X100V. I'll tell you what, usually you depress the shutter button slightly, catch some focus, and then click. But this one just seems to be going straight to click at the moment. Here we go. 1/2/5, 3.6, ISO 1250. Beautiful greens. Oh, let's get a bit closer. Here we go. Sketchbooking our way through the countryside. Looking ahead then in the year, as I mentioned, we do have the second week of the Scottish retreat. Now this one really is a retreat. We travel again to Inverness to stay on a working soft fruit farm with access to its own shop selling homegrown and local produce within reach of the most beautiful historic landscapes and towns and just, well, woodland. It's just gorgeous in that part of the world. The fifth, it is the fifth, isn't it? 1, 2, 3. Yeah, because we've got an extra week. The fifth Photowalk retreat celebrates the feeling our podcast brings to this community, I hope. It's an opportunity to, as I say, escape the noise and spend time with like-minded photographers. We'll be embracing new creative challenges, including, well, for some it's new, the darkroom skills. We'll be doing some creative writing. First time we've done that on the retreat. We'll be learning how to make sound a part of your stills photography and enjoying a breakaway as we encourage, talk with, eat with, laugh with, and of course walk with each other. 3 places. Now, we open up the second week. So the first week has gone. The second week, there are 6 places. 3 have already gone. 2 went in the last week while I was away on the retreat. I've still got some paperwork to do. I didn't have the best internet whilst I was out in the Gambia. But 3 places have gone. 3 remain. So if you'd like to go on the Scottish Photowalk retreat, you'll find all the details on the website. Just look up the top in the menu and find Scotland 24. Coming along to that part of the path on this walk, the Brimpton walk that I do, where there's a sort of a ford. When it had really rained, about a week or so before I went to the Gambia, it was difficult to jump across it. It was quite a jump. And as I walked towards it, I can hear the water's certainly whooshing. Oh, look at that. It might be another jumping challenge, this one. Look at this. Whoa. Fabulous, right. What's my most springy leg? I believe it's my left. There we go. Not a very dramatic moment, but all the same. Right, the assignment this month. I should have put a new assignment up. Last week. It was the first, wasn't it? I didn't appreciate it was going to be the first, and I missed it. But if I do one this week, February being a shorter month means there's hardly any time to get involved in a February assignment. So, I've decided to, if you don't mind, just keep January's going for another month. We didn't do that last year. I appreciate that. But I'm still uploading some that I couldn't manage whilst I was in the Gambia with the internet. Not to make too much of a point of that. I mean, we were away. We were off the beaten track for much of it. So a good excuse, I think. So we're breaking with tradition. And we'll keep the subject of resilience going. It's one-word assignments this year, set on the first Friday of the month, usually. So we'll keep that one running for one more month or 3 more weeks. So this month's assignment continues to be about resilience. What does the word mean to you? Because, well, there are so many connotations and understandings. To me, it was a news car that had been hit by bullets and a missile, actually. There's a photograph I made at the Imperial War Museum when we went with our 2 lads over the holidays and New Year break, because they were doing some research for some school projects. So I made this picture, and it got me thinking about the resilience of photojournalists and journalists as they go about their work, bringing us news and, well, hopefully the truth from places that we would never personally dare go to. So that was my picture of resilience. What will yours be? Send them in, please. I'll give you an address to send it into in just a moment's time. But I had this from Michael Tenbrink, which I will put on today's show page as we're mentioning it here, but I will put it onto the assignments page as well, Michael, of course. It's a photograph that shows us, in terms of, well, scale, really, the world, us as humans. I was going to say versus nature. Oh, sometimes it feels like that, doesn't it? But us as humans and nature as this, and it's a word I feel qualifies here. Nature is this awesome reminder of our place in the world. I think I can use that word because it's not associated with a blueberry muffin on Instagram. But let me read the words that came with your picture, Michael. From Michael: I took this during a long walk on a brisk winter's day on the east shore of Lake Como here in northern Italy. I was struck by how insignificant the sailboat in the picture appears when contrasted with the foreboding huge face of the cliffs. Yet it sails on nonetheless. I've drawn inspiration from this in recent days as I've been navigating my own challenges. Resilience in the midst of obstacles is one of the themes I explore both literally and metaphorically in my photography and writing on both Instagram and Substack. And I tell you what, Michael, I shall pop those links on the show page today. I started reading some of the stuff that you've written. Really very, yeah. It will be a rabbit hole I shall fall into later on, I'm absolutely sure. So, like Michael Tenbrink, send your entries to stories at photowalk.show. 2,500 pixels wide, please. If you can resize, if you can optimize them. Otherwise, I'll do the heavy lifting. But thank you for that. Superb picture, beautifully contrasty. Oh, look at it. That's, in terms of the subject matter in the photograph, that one really does float my boat. And then a quick postcard from Simon Biles. Do you remember me looking? It wasn't so far away from where I'm walking now, actually. Do you remember me walking and looking into a field and wondering if I could get across to a electricity pylon and look up from within the legs at what it would look like if you were right in the middle? And I couldn't reach it. There's either always, it seems to me, fencing around them, or it's a field that you can't get access to. Well, Simon Biles only went and did it. And the picture is on the show page. Hello, says Simon. I suspect you're enjoying African climes currently. Well, I was. I'm a bit cooler today. Just wanted to drop you a quick line after hearing your comment about pylons the other day. This is what they look like if you stand underneath and shoot upwards. And it's fascinating. Thank you, Simon. I feel I don't need to go and do it now. You've done it not just adequately, you've done it perfectly. All the best from Si. Simon, it's what are they? Oh, it's kaleidoscopes, isn't it? You know those things, it is kaleidoscopes that we used to look through and just twist a plastic thingy on the side and the shapes would move around. That's what it looks like for me. I know it's not quite the same thing, kaleidoscopes, but if you look at the show page today, I'll put Simon's picture on there and you'll think, oh, yeah. Well, I'm hoping you'll think, oh, yeah, Neil's right. I've no idea why I like your picture so much, Simon, but I really do. The experience I'm feeling by looking at your picture, this is going to sound strange, bear with me, but it's a bit, do you remember those 1980s executive toys that people used to put on desks? And I'm thinking about the one that had the silver marbles attached by a string, and you'd let one go and it'd go tick, took, tick, took. And the one at the end would fire up, and then it would come down, and then it would sort of go through all there used to be about 6, wasn't there, 6 or 7 silver balls on there, and then the one at the end would fire up and it would come down, and all the inertia would go through, and then the one at the end, and I could watch it for hours. It's like a puppy looking at something, thinking, well, I don't know what it's about, but I love it. I just want to keep watching it. And that's how I feel looking at your picture. It's fantastic. So thank you for doing that. And Simon, we're due to take a walk soon, aren't we? In Savernake Forest, you and I, which is local-ish to me, and I think local to you. So I'm looking forward to doing that. Right. Shall we have part 2 then of my conversation with Valérie Jardin and Josh Coombes? Yes, let's. From the Do Something for Nothing movement. Pictures will be on the show page to support our conversation. And here is part 2 of our chat.
What happens after the cut and after the picture? What happens to the... Well, actually, I'll come back to what happens to the pictures in a moment. But what happens to these people is that you've cut their hair. I've mentioned some of them. You know, there's a lot of smiling. There are tears. But what happens to the people afterwards? Do you keep a relationship? It must be pretty hard with all the haircuts that you've done over the years.
Yeah, of course. You know, there's been hundreds of people I've met over the years. But no, you know, I keep in touch, of course, where I can with the people that I can. It's a very transient existence. You know, people, if they have phone numbers, might lose them or change their number. People might move to another, you know, especially in countries like America, you know, people are moving around so much to different cities. But no, there's been a lot of people now I've kept in touch with, and the book. So, you know, I published the book a couple of years ago. Some of Valerie's photos are within those pages, and yeah, you know, there's people, especially within that book, that have really become friends now. You know, people I've been able to walk the line with on a journey of years. And, you know, for instance, one example, my friend Lavaine, she's somebody I met about 4 or 5 years ago. It was a winter night in London. I remember I was getting my phone fixed at the time, and it's an amazing thing, actually, an experiment, that when you don't have this device, you're actually looking out at the world and looking out at the people around you. I try and do that for my work a lot anyway, but in this situation, I was walking because I had about half an hour, and I met Lavaine. She was sleeping in this shop doorway in central London, and yeah, we started talking, and, you know, obviously I haven't got time to go into her whole story, but she's somebody who's been through a tremendous amount, and she'd come out of an abusive relationship. Her upbringing was incredibly difficult. The people who were supposed to love and support her really did the complete opposite. And we kept in touch. I cut her hair. I sometimes turn into somebody's hairdresser, not once, twice, 3 times. And that's when you can start to build some trust, and people realize you're not coming just to take the photo and putting it on Instagram. You know, you're there to show up and to maybe go to that meeting with them, to be able to see if you can actually, through your network, contact somebody who might be able to help a little bit more. And yeah, Lavaine's one of those people. And, you know, actually, in June, I was back in the UK for the whole of the summer last year, 2023. We actually share the same birthday. And it was timing had it, like it was just before her birthday. We moved her into her new flat in Elephant Castle in South London. And that was all Lavaine's work. That was her, really. She's a year into sobriety now. She was, when I met her, in a very different situation. She's just, like I said, I can't describe it in a way. We're so close. She's there for me when I've needed her. When I've gone through stuff in my life, I call her up on the phone, and she does the same for me, you know. So that's not everybody, but there are people like Lavaine, and there's some people who, of course, it's just that haircut, that day, that was that. It was just that moment. And I think my relationship with that is one of not being too attached, because I think the people who are supposed to stay in your life will, and I make the effort to try and do so when I can.
And what about you, Valérie, with the pictures and the people that you photographed? I know right near the start you said this is possibly or maybe the most important photographic project that you've ever done.
Yes, and actually, for a long time, I visited Vlad, who was the first gentleman we worked with in Paris. We met him right in the Marais, and they tend to stay in the same spot, especially in France. In Paris, they have their spot, and we met Vlad in a narrow street, and he was staying on above one of those. There was some heat coming from like a grate. Might have been a parking lot underneath or something. Not a subway, I don't think, but not a metro. But anyways, he was staying there, and that was his home. And so we spent time with him. I remember we had to knock and go into a shop to ask for a stool for him to sit. So I mean, it was like I'm running this direction, I'm running that direction, trying to facilitate, make him comfortable so that Josh wouldn't be on the ground, sitting on the ground, cutting his hair. So he's more in a regular outdoor salon situation. And so Vlad was so amazing, so beautiful. When he got his haircut, and I remember posting the pictures, everybody thought he looked like Bono, right? Do you remember that, Josh? And so he's on top of the Paris page, actually. And until 2 years ago, I saw Vlad 3-4 times a year whenever I was in Paris. I'd go to his spot and I'd sit with him and we talked. Yeah. And he read a lot. He had an entire library on a windowsill outdoor. We shared a lot of stories. We always talk about literature. Very smart guy. He was from Transylvania. And now all of a sudden he was not there. So I asked around because they all know each other. They have their spots in one neighborhood. They all know each other. And I said, what happened to Vlad? You know, I the second time I come now and he's not there. And it sounds like he had found a flat. And so I'm hopeful that he turned his life around, because it's incredible how much you will see a person change every year. I mean, it's like every year is 10 years on their face. That is the scary part. And I saw him during COVID or just after the lockdown. I mean, can you imagine being homeless in any big city, and then this pandemic strikes, and then shortly after that I stopped seeing him on the street. So I'm hoping he's doing well. But it was always the first thing I did. I would arrive in Paris. I would just head to his spot and we'd spend time together. Yeah.
I was reading something on the Instagram feed, Do Something for Nothing. I didn't have to look too far before I came up. I could have it's full of quotes and thoughts. But this was particularly potent immediately. You cannot buy back one moment in time. It's the most precious gift you have to give anyone. And that's perhaps, along with your sublime example of I think the idea of amplification, by the way, as Instagram as an analogy is amazing. But you're right. That's the gift. This is time, isn't it? This is time for people.
Yeah, that's it. You know, it's that quote. I remember that moment so well. There was a man on Skid Row in LA, and a lot of people will have heard or seen these places in the US, especially, where you have all these tent encampments. And, you know, when I turn up in these places, after years of doing this now, I still feel helpless. I still feel like, what the bloody hell am I doing here? Hairdresser with my backpack on, entering this world. It's easy for me to go back to a place of, just feeling, how the hell can I make a difference? But I bring it back to words and quotes like that. So I met a man in Skid Row who said those words, and I have it on film, actually, because I was filming like a short film down there. It was an art exhibition I put on with a friend, and it became part of that. And he said, you can't buy back a moment in time. It's the most precious gift you have to give anybody. Yeah. If you give a person your time, you can't buy it back. You can't spend $1 trillion a day to buy back a moment in time. Yeah. And look, it's interesting. You know, we measure things in a material world where, of course, depending culturally, your background and your teachings and where you come from. But in the West, you know, it's very easy to fall into just living in this reality of, well, this is mine, you know, my car, my house, and this is all my belongings inside. And, you know, of course, we create our own world. And we kind of end up, I think, sometimes forgetting that there's things that we can't measure tangibly like that. I could go and I could go down to Skid Row where I was talking about, and of course I could hand everybody $100, you know, and they're going to be really happy about that, you know. But there's something else that you can go and give, and yeah, I can't do that. I can't be somebody's ATM, you know. I'm not a not-for-profit or a charity. I don't have a great deal of resources doing this work, but I can show up, and I've just placed such a higher value on what that means to a person. You know, if you really put yourself in that situation, you know, if you, I know we can try really hard to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes, but really imagining your daily reality being waking up in a tent in the middle of this city with the trash and the rats and all of that stuff, and almost forgotten about by society. Yes, of course you need that money. Of course you need it, but that's really going to be gone within a few days. But if someone's turning up for you who knows your name and has some awareness on your life and who you are, and cares about you in some way, albeit with a certain boundary, you know, they can't invite you back perhaps to live in their house with them, but they can come in and check on you. I see how much that means to people. And that's not me I'm talking about here. I mean, God, down in Skid Row, there's an organization I go and hang out and work with down there called Paulie's Project. And the guy who runs it, Paul, he's just like, he knows everybody's name. He's been going down there for years. People, you can see how much it means, just these relationships he fosters with all these different people. And also there's something I just wanted to wrap that up as well. I'm not trying to have a dig or have a go at anybody here, but there's something about not being an arm of the government as well, because a lot of people have lost trust in that a long time ago. You know, I mean, especially let's say in America where, I've seen people who've been, you know, a bus has hit them and they're pretty much there dying, but they can't go to a hospital because they haven't got healthcare. So someone comes out from the government, they've already lost trust in that. So somebody comes out on the street and meets you on their level and says, yeah, I'm really sorry, I can't fix everything here, but I'm going to really try and learn about your life and maybe learn about some ways I can support you. There's something in that. That's what community is. That's what I think now. Of course, I prefer a situation where we had so much more support for people in this position who are so vulnerable. But how are we going to show up in the meantime? Like, yeah, you might not feel like as an individual you can do everything, but when I've seen the way that when that energy kind of comes together and people join together, that forms what community can look like for people in that situation.
Valérie, I'm going to ask you to think about this question from the photographic angle as well in a moment. But first of all, Josh, I do love this idea of being able to do something for nothing. I mentioned it is a movement with a capital M now, really. There may well be those listening now, I certainly hope there are, who are thinking, well, what can I do? What do I have? What's my thing? What can I bring to this world in the same way that Josh has? I can't cut hair. What's my gift?
I think that ultimately there's so many different ways you can reach out to a person. To run through some of the moments that appeared on social media following kind of some of the posts that I put out there at the beginning, you know, those yoga teachers going in to volunteer their time in drug rehabilitation centers to offer classes for free. Mm-hmm. There was students going in to have lunch and spend time in a facility for senior citizens, if we're speaking to the US audience, or in the UK, like an elderly person's home. Yeah. And going to have lunch with people who don't have any family who come in and see them, spending some time with them. This became not just about homelessness. The people also picture a family who've moved onto your street, seeking asylum, perhaps been on one hell of a journey, escaping all kinds of just awful situations, perhaps having to flee their own country. What happens if you go and you knock on their door and you welcome them to the neighborhood? Perhaps you invite them around for dinner, you cook for them, you share, you break bread with them. This really for me is about, we're living in a time of such polarization, such divisiveness. It's so easy to fall into the trap of fearing the other, that person in front of us, whoever and whatever they may look like. And look, I am somebody who I have to keep my wits about me and my instincts when I go out and do this work. I know what it's like to feel like I'm in a dangerous situation. And I'm not saying you go out and you put yourself in any situation where you're going to expose yourself or cross healthy boundaries and what that looks like for you. But I'm not buying this idea that we're supposed to walk around and be scared of one another. It's not how I live my life. It's about going out there with your heart open still, to trust people, to actually see the good in the person in front of you, and to not get fooled by whatever the surface is that's presenting themselves to you. So yes, you might be listening to this thinking, what can I do? Well, I'd say as an exercise to think about the things you're good at. Like for me, it's like, yeah, okay, you're not good at, but the things you enjoy. Like, okay, so I was cutting hair in a salon. That's actually something I really enjoyed doing as my work. Your work might look different, but, music is a big part of my life still.
Yeah.
Art, that's what really engages me, like things that you're interested in. And maybe there's something you do have, like a skill set that might not be obvious to you, that you can apply to a scheme or an initiative that's already happening. Google what's happening in your area. There's going to be people who are trying to help, whatever issue that you feel compassionate about. Like, try and connect the dots. There might be an avenue there to go and volunteer your time in a way that isn't just a ladle at a soup kitchen. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but there might be a way that you, as whoever you are, as an individual, can apply your skills to try and help somebody. Of course, I don't know exactly what that looks like, but to try and think on that level, I think is important, because then you're giving yourself in a way that I think, it connects you more to the situation, to build a bridge to that person or that group of people.
Well, I've got a final question for you in a moment, but I want to, first of all, Valérie, a couple of questions. Well, initially, the photographic version of what Josh has just said, how can we give of ourselves? Because I actually think that photographers do have a gift. You've shown that actually through your work with Josh.
Yes, it was all about telling the story. And to go back on what Josh was saying, I have to say that on the streets of New York and Paris, and we met dozens of people, no one asked us for money, for one thing.
No.
But the change in them from the moment we met them, and the spark in their eyes when we left them, the transformation was astonishing. Throughout. I mean, we danced. We remember when we had the music in front of Gare de Lyon, this train station, and we started dancing. I mean, those moments were just amazing. Yeah. And photographers have a gift. They can tell stories. And there's nothing more powerful than the still photograph and the story in a frame or in a selection of photographs. So there's a lot of things photographers can do. You can go and photograph families of new immigrants who don't know anything, who don't even speak the language, and move into your neighborhood and offer to do a family portrait of them. You have any idea how that would brighten their day? It can be so simple. We can only do little things. We're not going to change the world, but if we all do little things, yes, we can change the world.
Well, if everybody paid it forward, we would, wouldn't we? And in terms of books, you've got some ebooks. I know, Josh, maybe you'll come back with your book in a second, but there's is it 2 ebooks that you've done on this?
Yes. Yeah. So actually, with the help of a wonderful gentleman named Paul Vincent in the UK, who actually offered. I had my podcast at the time, so it was really easy to try to get reach out to people. Hey, we need help putting these ebooks together to raise money for Do Something for Nothing. And Paul in the UK right away reached out, and he designed both ebooks as a volunteer, and that was so wonderful. He did such a beautiful job. And so the ebooks have the photographs and the story, which we actually then used for the exhibits. And because the stories are really important, we have quotes. We took notes every time so we didn't take notes during the conversation, but after each haircut, Josh and I would find a little corner or go into a cafe or something, and then we would do recordings on the phone. And right. I still have those, Josh, and share everything we remembered, the quotes, the conversation, all the little details that really, that we noticed. So he noticed things I didn't, and vice versa. So we would have those stories. And so the 2 ebooks are free for download on my website, with all my books. So they're free downloads, and any donation goes to help Josh pursue what he's doing. So feel free to download them. If you have a few bucks to spare, it will be put to good use to help Josh out.
And you have a book, Josh, now.
Yeah, I do. So that's titled Do Something for Nothing. And as I mentioned, I think from a photography standpoint, it was a great learning for me, because it was the first time I really went out behind the lens as well with a lot of the subjects that I'd meet, because I couldn't have a photographer with me the whole time. But yeah, Valerie's photos are in there as well, which is such a beautiful thing, because those ebooks, the photography, as Valérie mentioned, New York and Paris, those chapters, we even did some in Twin Cities where she is. Just those photographs are just so incredible. And just to reflect on what you were saying, I think photography it's everything. You're telling stories, and it can be enough to really move somebody, to really, an image, a photograph. God, I've experienced that in my own life. It can be enough to just bring such humanity to a person or an issue in this case, and that's huge. That's a huge gift to go and give, and the ripple of that is massive. And just briefly, I know we're kind of getting on with time, but the first email I sent to Valérie randomly years and years ago, it's led to all of this, because she was engaged in this in a way where she felt like she could have just said, no, I sent her a random email connecting to see if I could, while I'm in Paris, connect with a street photographer. And she was so accommodating. It's about being open to these things as well. There's having the gift, but then there's having this openness to actually pursue what might be this random stranger emailing you from afar and seeing where that connection goes. And the photographer she set me up with for that trip, because she wasn't in Paris, Laurent, he actually only last year, through the work that we've done together, had an exhibit in Paris of the photographs that he's taken of me and these people that we've met doing this work. So, these things, it's amazing, that ripple that Valérie created from just getting back to me and being able to do that. Yeah, it's having the gift, but also being able to put yourself out there in these situations to get out of your comfort zone. That's a big part of it. Most of these things in life, when we get out of our comfort zone, it's asking us to grow, to evolve, to take the skill we have, in this case photography, to see how we can apply it in a setting we're not used to. And I think that's when there's a lot of potential to really to help.
And my thanks to Joshua Coombes and Valérie Jardin for their time talking with me. Oh, the rain has really started. Hey, I'm gonna have to hide this X100 away or find something to shelter under. Oh, I can't understand this, by the way, why there's so many midges. I thought midges were supposed to be something you got in the summer. I think I might have mentioned this before. They seem to be hardy along this route. Yeah, we're tough round here. Oof. Just walk through. I think I've eaten 100 weights worth. Don't need tea tonight. That's not the last, by the way, you'll hear of Josh today. Because he returns at the end of the Playout song for a question I often ask at the end of my conversations. And there's a particular reason why I think this, which is a real break with tradition really, belongs right at the end, the tail end of the show. Words that I hope will leave you, me and even my other listener thinking. And, that's it for today. If you can't wait until next Friday and you want to walk a little further together, then the Extra Mile edition number 419 is waiting for you. Whoa, hang on, Neil. 419? The last Extra Mile was number 74. Have I missed 345 episodes in the space of a week? No, you haven't. I'd have to suspend time for that. And I haven't invented that machine. I'm still working on the teleporter. No, there's a reason I'm going to align the Extra Mile edition numbers at last with the Friday episode, and that's because from a few weeks' time or so, I'll be airing an additional segment of my conversations with a week's guest on the Extra Mile. And so it makes sense that, I don't know, if Frida blogs on episode 500, the extra bit containing her thoughts about just having invented a teleporter, the part 2 or 3 of our conversation, if you will, continues on the extra mile. It makes more sense that both the numbers are the same. You know, episode 500 marries up of the photo walk with episode 500 of the extra mile. It's difficult for me to do things leaping that far forward with numbers. I'm shuddering just a little bit, but that's what we're doing. So that's why the extra mile is edition number 419. Emily Joof is my guest from the recent photo walk retreat, stroke adventure, stroke assignment in the Gambia. She's trying to bring reading to the country as something, the Gambia that is, as something that's an enjoyable pastime rather than simply a lesson to learn how to read and write. It's a different kind of program in many ways, but it plays into an idea I've had for what I'm going to call the 1 minute portrait. An idea, a thought I had while I was in the Gambia, which I will talk about on the extra mile. A few other odds and bobs about my time away, and perhaps some letters as well. So you can join the extra mile by hitting the orange button in the top right hand side of the website. There we go, just there. You've got it instantly. Perfect. So yes, our PS to the show is to come, our postscript. It's a bit different today. It's from Josh. It's more than just a PS. But before that, we need a play-out song just to make some final frames to or think about what's been said today. And it's a song from The Hunts. And this is a rather a special song. I mean, they're all special, our play-out songs, because it's not just a chance to have a song at the end of a show. I pick them as far as I can, usually anyway, to marry to the moment. And this song today is called Human. And even though it's in essence a love song, I couldn't help but get drawn to some of the lyrics, such as, well, let me read a few. Maybe we're only human, and if it's not easy, don't give up on me. Could you risk your world in my hands? I have, and I'll do it again. Be patient, because I'll make mistakes. Think kindly of me every day. And I think kindness and connection is, well, I know that's what we've been talking about today. Being noticed, the special gift that is connection and communication. It's something that we can gift back, not just through our photography, but personally as well. And in terms of the photography, I wonder if, like me, this thing we do, this amazing thing that we have called photography, whether you consider yourself a master or a novice or anything in between, I think, and perhaps you can think about this as the song plays, I reckon it's introduced you, as it has me, to people that we might never have otherwise spoken with. This thing called photography, particularly those of us who've asked to make a picture of somebody as a portrait, and particularly when we're out on the streets. So the PS today is at the end of the song as usual, but it's a longer PS, and it's a piece by Josh when I asked him the famous why question. I really wanted his words today to be the last on the show, but here's that song by The Hunts. It's called Human.
Where has your heart come undone? Where haven't you known all along? I guess I am clumsy with words. I guess I'm easily hurt.
fantastic song from The Hunts. It's called Human. My sincere thanks to you if you are or you're about to become an extra miler. My promise to you is to keep building this community of kindness, a safe place to share our thoughts about this thing that we do as we walk, photographing the world around us. My thanks to Neil Ford, who looks after IT, Andrea Gilpin, who's across Instagram, and Kelly Mitchell with Emily Renier, who look after our Facebook members. And the last minute or so today goes rightly to one of my guests, Joshua Coombes from the Do Something for Nothing movement. You'll have expected me to ask him the why question, and I did. And here's what he had to say in reply.
Like anything that's evolved, yeah, right now it's to be here now, to be present with the day. And I'm always bringing myself back to, how can I walk out in the world today? How can I walk out in the world? It might not be the person we spoke about who's experiencing homelessness on the street. It's just like feeling connected to myself, feeling connected to the people around me, connected to this world. It's that's really what it's kind of, got down to. Just how can I show up in each moment and feel connected? I know what it's like to feel disconnected, so feeling connected is really important to me. Yeah.
The Photowalk is a Loading Zone production.